Hey y'all, welcome back to the YouTube channel. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I am so excited to have you here as we begin to talk through Ironman Florida 2024. I have had a couple of weeks to kind of process everything that happened in preparation for and during Ironman Florida 2024, and I'm just so excited to share that with you all here. That being said, there's a lot of information. It's just my experience, so definitely take it with a grain of salt. But this is exactly how I encountered the whole weekend and honestly had a blast. First off, it started with us leaving here a few days early, so we left on Wednesday. It is about a 12 to 13-hour drive just to get to Panama City Beach, Florida. And once we arrived in Panama City Beach, it was we stayed in a condo right on, it was the Calypso Towers, and it's right on the beach right there in the Gulf. And it was perfect because actually our balcony, you could see the pier and the actual swim start for Ironman. So it was really a fantastic location, and it was right across from Pier Park Mall, which is where Transition was, and just across that street there was Aaron Besant Park, which was Ironman Village. So fantastic spot. Once we got into town, we threw some stuff in the room, and we actually met up with one of our friends, Shanna, who just lives down the street, and she was also there to compete in Ironman Florida. We met for dinner at a nice little restaurant, and then we trekked to Publix to do all the grocery shopping. So think bagels. We brought peanut butter from home. Eggs, just kind of some basic items that we needed just to get us through the weekend. Coffee, all the essentials, right? And once we did that, just finished unloading the car at the condo, called it a night, knowing that kind of it's going to be a packed schedule weekend, right? Thursday morning, did a quick shakeout run, the Hoka shakeout run, which was a lot of fun. Did that around 8 a.m. And there was quite a few other athletes there, which always makes the feel a little bit more electric and fun. And then once I was done with that, I ran up, grabbed Mary, got ready for the day, and we went to Ironman Village and was able to check in easily. Of course, shopped around the Ironman store, visited a couple of the vendors there, and then kind of had this lull or this break in our schedule, which honestly was so great. We were able to try out a new or a diner down the road, and just look at some of the fun little shops down on that main strip, so that we could, of course, gather ideas for gifts to bring home to our kids. And then that afternoon, we went to athlete briefing, um, and it was really just good to see a bunch of other athletes, and just kind of have some of those lingering questions out there. Since this was my first full distance, it's very different from a transition perspective than a 70.3 event. And so the way that you don't necessarily have your stuff at your transition area, but you have transition bags and um, just some of those logistical items was actually really helpful to go to athlete briefing for. And those never really last super long. The weather, honestly, it was warm, but it was pretty great in the shade. So that was super fun. And Mary and I kind of just hung around there for a bit to kind of see what was there. And then we went and grabbed dinner, and that was Halloween. So it was super fun in Pier Park Mall area for the kids. Any kids that were there could go trick or treating at all the stores. So you saw a lot of kids in costume. Then Mary and I went and walked the pier. So the pier the swim course is 2 loops, so a 1.2 mile loop around the pier. And while the pier is only zero point 0.2 miles, 0.2-ish miles, it was nice to be able to see. They didn't have the Roca colored buoys out, but they did have the white dropped buoys where they attach those Roca buoys to. So it was super nice to see, or begin to see some of that. The waves were pretty rough. We definitely saw a lot of sea life down there, but it was a nice time to just kind of get out on the pier and do something related to the race weekend, but not at the same time. And we called that a night. And Friday morning, we was the Roca practice swim, and you could, as long as you had checked in and gotten your timing chip, you were able to take part in the Roca swim practice swim. So they had only placed the first 2 buoys out, and you could go out and back to those. And they did have some course support there, should you need it, which was super great. I will say I woke up that morning on Friday and I was having my coffee in the condo, and I realized, once I checked the weather, that it was a rip current statement. There was a rip current warning. It was there. And so it made me a little nervous to get out into the water. But I told myself that I have to figure out how to put my head underwater and swim in open water. And so I went down. Mary stayed in the condo, but I went down, and I got into the water and I made it to the first buoy. And honestly, I was freaking out at this point. While I loved having the practice swim, um, there was no marked course. I mean, it was really just the 2 buoys. And so people were coming out, right? Like you're just kind of going through where you would enter for the swim start anyway, and people were coming back that same way. And so, you're dodging people coming this way, you're dodging people going out, and again, it's a rip current statement, and so the waves are pretty thrashing. And it was just kind of a mess, if I'm being honest. And so I made it out to the first buoy, and I just told myself, like, I'm literally going to die in these waters tomorrow. And so I began to try to swim back. And I mean, it was like swimming, but not really going anywhere. And on our condo, on the fridge, it said what to do in a rip current. And Mary was sure to point that out to me before I had left. And so, you're supposed to swim parallel to the shore. And so I started to kind of swim sideways, and then realized that I could actually make a little bit more forward progress. And I flipped onto my back and was able to kind of backstroke it in, which felt great because I was a little more out of the way of some of the athletes, and it wasn't so congested, which also made me feel really nervous in the water. I got out of the water and I was like, there's no way. There's no way I can do this tomorrow. I began to panic on the beach, just sitting there. Like, I just really don't know how I'm going to do this. This was pretty awful. And I went back upstairs, got showered up for the day, and Mary and I went and grabbed a bite to eat. And I really could barely eat at this point because I was really nervous. But also inside of me was telling me, like, you have to eat because this is fueling you for tomorrow. And so once once we kind of got all that sorted out, got back to the hotel or the condo, about midday or so, Shanna came over to our place before we went to turn bikes in. Bikes had to be in by 3 p.m. that day. And so I want to say around 1-ish or so, Shanna came over, and we, I prepped my bikes, and we kind of went over everything that was in the transition bag, each transition bag, which was really helpful. and we trekked our stuff down to transition. Checked everything in, our bikes, our transition bags, just kind of felt out the vibe of it all. And once we did that, we just kind of hung around, grabbed a really early dinner at Ford's Garage right there in Pier Park, and it was perfect. I was luckily able to eat most of my dinner, which felt really good. Even though it was an early dinner, we knew that I would also have to eat something later that night. So after that, really called it a night, called it an early night, and knowing that we're going to be up really early the next day and it's going to be a long day. Went back to the condo. I think I ended up eating like an Uncrustable or something else. I definitely kept eating for the most part. So super great, which leads us into race day. So woke up. It's race day. It's Saturday morning. I want to say we woke up around 3:30 or 4, and it was immediate nerves, right? Like I was like, oh Lord, what did I do? What did I sign up for? And um, in all honesty, I was super excited and really, really nervous. And I just kept telling myself, like, if you can make it through the swim, you just have to bike and run. And I know for a lot of people, that might be like crazy, and it is probably a little crazy. But for me, like the swim is just always the hardest. And so the what if I can get onto the bike, I'm like, yes, and I don't have a mechanical issue. I'm like I can trudge through it. And then if I can get onto the run, I'm thinking to myself, sweet, that was the background I come from anyway, is running. And so and running is the best. It's run, walk, or crawl. And so that's where my head is going. And I am having coffee and I'm trying to down um, half a bagel with peanut butter, and I'm just trying to kind of live normally in a truncated amount of time before obviously we get suited up and head down to transition to put our nutrition in our bags, in on our bike, and just really make sure we're completely prepped for the day. Now that being said, I think Shanna met us downstairs. We had to be at swim start around 6:30 ish, and so I think Shanna met us downstairs around 5:15, 5:30. Um, of our condo, and so we all walked over together. Mary was Sherpa-ing for not only me but also for Shanna, and we had purchased her the VIP package, so Mary was well taken care of during the day, which I 100% recommend. I mean, they have food for your spectators all day at different stops. She was able to be out on the pier as we were swimming, which allowed her to help see us, and then some perfect viewing spots for the run. And then, of course, at the finish line, it's the last tent. And so she was able to see kind of all of the amazing folks cross the finish line, which I think is super, super awesome. So Mary was stripping for both of us, and so we all walked down together, and Shannon and I kind of set our stuff up, made sure our bike tires were pumped, set our nutrition up, all the things. And there was a unicorn in an inflatable a person in an inflatable unicorn costume, I should say, in transition, just kind of giving people high fives and hugs. And I hugged that unicorn for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably 5 seconds. And it helped calm me a little bit, which I know sounds a little wild, but sometimes it's just random people being like, "You've got this. Get out of your head. You've got this." That definitely helped fuel me personally, and it's awesome. So once we got out of transition, Shanna said, "Hey, like, do you mind if I pray for us?" And I'm like, "Please do." And so we kind of sat on the sidewalk right there. and Shanna just prayed for us. Um, I was so nervous at this point that I was nervous throwing up. And I had had some banana in the condo. And so at this point, I'm like, yum, I get to taste the banana again. Um, but Shanna prayed for us, which was fantastic. We walked over to put our run special needs bag. And then we walked over to swim start. And when we walked over to swim start, Mary walked over to the pier, so she could do viewing, and it was time to go. So at this time, the sun is rising over the horizon. It's getting a little bit more daylight out, and we're starting to get some folks getting into the water. Shane and I seated ourselves right at about 1:30 to 1:40, actually at the very end of 1:30 to 1:40. So right at essentially the 1:40, 1 hour and 40 minute mark. And I felt really comfortable with that, especially knowing how the day before had gone. I really said to myself, like, if I seed myself at 1:40, I don't think I'm going to have a ton of people trying to swim over me. And I don't think that a lot of people, I just think it's going to be a little less congested for me personally because I think I'm going to be seated appropriately. Um, Especially kind of knowing that the waves were looking a lot calmer, but they weren't at all means calm. It was just a lot calmer than they were the day before at the same time. So that being said, probably about 15-20 minutes later, we were in the water. They really worked to get you in the water quickly, which was super nice. We had talked to quite a few people in line, and we could see Mary on the pier, which was super great. So Shane and I started together, and actually this first lap kind of swam the whole lap together. We got out of the water. So what's unique about the Panama City Beach, Florida Ironman is it's called an Australian exit. You get once you're done with the first 1.2 miles, you get out, you get back onto the beach, and you dive back into the water to swim that next 1.2 miles before you head to swim out. And so we actually swam the whole first lap together, unknowingly, really. Um, and we got out of the water the same together. We saw Mary up on the pier. There was water to rinse your mouth, which was super helpful. And we got right back into the water. And the second lap, obviously, that had taken 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere in there, right? And by now, the water's starting to pick up a little more. There's definitely more waves. So on the second lap, it's definitely a little bit more rougher. Second lap, I got stung by a jellyfish on my foot, which is not bad. And then I definitely felt something under the water. I'm just saying it felt rubbery, and it was large, and I hated every minute of it. But we were able to kind of get through the swim, and I saw Shanna up until about halfway on that second lap. And then I think she just kind of picked up her speed a little bit, which is fantastic. And so finally made it out of the water, and I just felt fantastic. Once I got out of the water, I was like, heck yes. They had people pouring water um, right there for all of us, which was fantastic. So you could get a sip of water, rinse your mouth out, whatever you need to do. The water is super salty. And trust me, I swallowed a ton of it. I even threw up in the water because I just took too much in of that salty water, and it just had to come back out. And so once I made it to swim out, I was like, heck yes, like this is it. I cashed the swim. I just got to make it through the bike and the run. And what's nice, they have little kind of like a shower that you kind of run through on your way to transition. Let me tell you, when I say I stood under that, I stood under it just to get all that salt because it was so salty. I'm already a super salty sweater. I did not want to have to deal with that later through the day. So that was super great to have. And I really enjoyed just being able to kind of rinse my face off and all the things. What is very different from a full versus a 70.3 is you get your T1 bag or your bike bag, and you go directly into your change tent. And you kind of get ready in your change tent, right? So there's people that maybe didn't swim in the same items that they were going to utilize to bike for. So you've got people changing, you've got tons of water in there, you've got I'm sitting in there just kind of getting my socks on, getting my shoes on, my helmet, all the things before I dump my wetsuit and everything back into that bike bag. Um, and then you take that bag with you to your bike. And what was super great is at this point there was a volunteer there, and he's like, "Oh, you look lost." I was like, "Well, I have to use the restroom." Um, and I need to grab my bike. He's like, "What's your bike number?" And I told him my bike number. He grabbed my bike and met me at the restroom. And so that was super nice. And then I was out on the bike ride. The bike ride was phenomenal. The first 10-ish miles or so are pretty shaded. And or the sun's just not super high at that point. So it felt fantastic. It definitely dries you out a bit. And this is the point when you're like, you got to lock in. This is the time to lock in and make sure you're pushing nutrition and make sure that, we are pushing through the ball of our foot, and we're not kind of stomping down. We're not exerting a ton of power at the beginning because we know it's a long day ahead still. And so at this point, I am enjoying the bike ride. Um, I was a little less concerned with anything mechanical. I did get tubeless tires before Waco, if you recall, and so I did feel a little bit more comfortable and like I'm hoping I really don't have to change tire, and we should have a pretty good day. There was a bit of a headwind on the way out. I would say just about to mile 70. And once you hit around mile 70, there was a bit of a tailwind really helping some of the way back. Not all the way, but some of the way back, about 20 miles. Um, I did not stop. I gathered nutrition from the aid stations. And when I say gathered nutrition, mainly it was a banana or water. And I would kind of alternate the bottles I was using to fill up my torpedo system, and then supplement anything else in with the water bottles that they gave us. And then I did stop for special needs. I want to say special needs was around mile 49 to 52, somewhere in there. Um, and I stopped for special needs, which had salt and some gummies, and it just had more chamoy butter and things of that nature. Super great. I took the time to sunscreen up some more. It was hot at this point. The sun was really beaming down. The high was, I think, 85 that day with a ton of humidity because you're right on the coast. And so it was definitely warmer than I think anybody had anticipated. And I think that that's my theme of 2024 is that every race I've done this year has been so hot, temperature wise. So it is what it is. And I just stopped for that and kept moving. Once I got back to the bike, I made it to this little town, and I had made a right hand turn, and I was thinking about my friends that live not far from there, um, not too far, an hour and a half or so. And I was thinking, oh, I wonder if I'm going to see them today or this weekend. I'm really hoping that I do. Um, and not 30 seconds later, I look to my right, and my friends with their three little kids in tow are there, like cheering me on, like, there he is. And um, my friend Ben went down the side of the road running after me. Mind you, I'm going like 15 miles, 16, 17 miles an hour. He's running after me, like praying, like, please keep him safe and keep him going good for the day, and shouting it out. And I loved every minute of it. And um, it was something that I really didn't even know that I needed until I had it. And then I was like, oh, that really helped fuel me. So made it up this hill, mile 70-ish or so, I want to say. At the top of the hill is the aid station, kind of, and then you turn around and come back down. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was tough, right? Like I've experienced headwinds. We've had quite a bit of elevation gain at this point, so made it back, start coming back down, and I see my friends again. They had come to the other side of the street, and they ended up following me for quite some miles and just cheering me on. And I loved it. They captured pictures and videos, and it was so great. It really just helped fuel a little bit of that kind of lull as you're in the middle of your race. And so once I made it to mile 100 ish. There's a couple funky turns and things of that nature on the bike course that I did not love. And you definitely, I feel like around mile 90 ish or so, you definitely slow down a little bit because of some of these turns. Like at one point, we went through a Publix, which is a grocery store, parking lot, which I thought was odd. And then we get back out onto the highway and we go down, and then we almost like on boards, we go down into a park, and I thought to myself, like, we clearly don't have our mountain bikes. And then till we kind of trek back up, and it got a little bottlenecked right there for sure. People were kind of riding in pelotons then, and drove me a little wild. But it was good overall. Once I hit mile 100, I will say the last 12 miles felt like they took an eternity. And I think it's just because you're you're thinking to yourself, okay, I only have 12 miles to go, and then I just run. I have 12 miles to go, and then I just run. 12 miles to go, and then I just run. And um, and then what felt like 10 minutes later, I'd be like, okay, I only have 11 miles to go and a run, and 11 miles to go and a run. But it just definitely felt like it took forever, those last 12 miles. Once I got back into town and kind of off of my bike right there at bike dismount, saw my friends, saw Mary, it felt really good. And um, once I did that, what's great about the full is they take your bike for you and they re-rack it. So you're able to go straight to your run bag, straight to the change tent, um, and then you drop your bag again and they'll take it for you. So it was super easy in that sense. Once I got all of my stuff, changed my shoes, I changed socks, got my hat on, all the things. Got out, saw them, my family and friends again before getting back, before really starting the run. And I just told myself, like, okay, I just got to run. I just got to run. Mind you, I've never run a marathon. I have raced quite a few half marathons, but never a full marathon. And so this was a first for me. And I definitely felt prepared enough to run that distance, um, but also a little. I was warm. It was hot. I think on the last bike aid station around mile 98 ish, um, I had waited to grab the last water from the last volunteer, and she didn't pop it open. Not only did she not pop it open, she didn't take the seal off or pop it open, and it was just a little congested, and I couldn't feasibly do that and pour the water and dispose of it before the trash area, and so I ended up just chucking the bottle, which in hindsight really screwed me because I lost out on a little bit of that nutrition, which I plan to utilize to begin the run. Not that it was detrimental to the run, it was just thinking back, I really appreciate the volunteers that really work tirelessly to make sure that we have things opened and prepped and ready to go for us, because that is that really makes or breaks a lot of your race day. That being said, back out of the run course. So it's a 2 loop course. So out, back, and you get your runs personal needs when you come to mile 13 ish. And so you kind of pass your personal needs. There's an aid station every mile ish or so. And I had run pretty well first mile, 2 miles maybe. And then I was so sick to my stomach. I was like, what happened? And so by mile 5, I am on the side of the course, just dry heaving, um, painfully. And um, nothing. So then I continue. I make it out to kind of the turnaround, so mile 6.5, 7-ish. And I start coming back, and I'm trying to down water. I took some Mortal at this point. I'm just trying to do all the things to try and help get me through, and nothing's really working. I make it to mile 11. I'm dry heaving again, um, and then it hit me like, what do they give people in the hospital or pregnant women? They give them ice chips. And so I'm like, okay, I make it to the next aid station, I get ice chips. And that's what I did. I started grabbing a cup of ice at every aid station, chewing on it, and eating the ice till the next aid station. And so I made it to mile 13, saw Mary and our friends, and I looked at Mary and I'm like, I don't know how, I don't think I can do the rest of this. And ever so lovingly, and I will always appreciate her for this, she said, go get your salt in your special needs bag, go get your Tylenol, and I'll see you at the finish line. And in the moment, I really hated her. But in hindsight, I know she just did it because she knew that I could do it as well. And that at this point, I'm just really fighting that mental battle. I am fighting some physical ailments, right? But I'm really fighting this mental battle. And so I make it to, I grab my special needs, I do all the things. I think the second aid station back in, so mile 415 ish, had chicken broth. And I was like, okay, you've just got to try some of it. And I did. It was really, really hot. The sun had set at this point. It was really, really hot. But I took some of it and I was like, yeah, like I think I just need like 2 or 3 sips of this. Took a couple sips, grabbed my ice, and just kept trekking and trekking and trekking and trekking. And I saw quite a few people on the run course. I was able to see Shanna a couple times, even at the aid station, which also helps fuel you a little bit. And I made it to mile 22 ish. And I saw our friends Ben and Kayla and their kids again. And they're like, you got this. You got this. It's only, 4 point some miles to go. So they had gone to get dinner, and then they were actually heading back to the finish line. And so I'm like, all right. So, then you get down to mile 23 and you're like, okay, it's only a 5K. Like I can do a 5K. Um, and really kind of this from what happened in the first lap, first 13-ish miles was me walking most of it, to me now being able to at least jog to hold an 11, 10 to 11, 10 to 12-ish pace, just kind of based on where I was at. And it felt a lot better. And once I was able to kind of make it into the corral, there's a first timer's bell on your left hand side, which was fantastic. Somebody had broken it, like 3 people before me, but the spectators were like, it's right here, it's right here. And so you kind of grab the thing off the ground and ring the bell, and I'm running in, and I kind of timed it perfectly where I had given the people in front of me space to get their photo ops. Um, and I was like, all right, so kind of just going in pretty slow. And this guy behind me just kind of like comes up, cuts me off, and like totally cuts off my pictures, honestly. In fact, I gotta figure out like how to take that guy out of my pictures because just ruined him. But I crossed that finish line, and let me tell you, there's like no greater feeling than telling yourself that you can do something, training for months and months and months of endurance work where you are heavily in there with your thoughts. You are eating a ton of food. You're really training your body physically, you're training your mind mentally, and you're just really figuring kind of how all the pieces work together and then crossing that finish line and being like, I did that. Like I was able to do that. My body was able to move for 14 plus hours nonstop, basically, and just go without music, unless you count singing I'm a Gummy Bear to yourself 500 times on the bike. But there's just a lot in that moment that there's a reason I think people are overcome with emotion at the finish line is because there's just so much that has gone into that, which I think is fantastic. Separately, once I crossed that finish line, I'm like, give me all the water. Those poor people that have to take off your timing chip, I was like, I am soaked in sweat, soaked. And these poor people are like, have no problem going down to my ankle and taking off a sweaty bracelet or sweaty timing chip that is soaked in sweat. And then grabbed my photos. And then the medical tent was on the right, and the athlete food tent was on the left. And let me tell you, I was so close to going to the right. And just, I think I knew something was wrong because I did not feel great. But the rest of me was like, it's fine. Your family's here, your friends are here, it's going to be fine. So I made it through the athlete food tent, grabbed some food, even though I really didn't want to eat anything. And I went and saw all my friends and family and sat on the ground, and I sat there. They went and got me one of the space blankets from medical, and I was shivering. I was so cold, even though I was literally just drenched in sweat. And they sat there with me. Our friends had 3 little kids, and they sat there with me for what had to have been 45 minutes of me just like, I just have to, I just gotta like hold on right here for a second, and kind of regather my thoughts and just regather who I am, um, and then sometime after that we had actually made our way back to the finish line to cheer Shanna coming in, which was fantastic. And then after that, gathered our bikes and transition bags and all the things. And honestly, I don't think I could have done that. Like Mary and Ben had to go get all of my items to bring back to the condo. But there was a moment of like, yes, I freaking did that. And then the other moment of just like so much gratitude for everybody involved, right? So whether it be volunteers at the event, to, of course, my wonderful wife and Sherpa Mary, to friends that came out, and trekked so far with their kids, to, my coach and my friends and my gym community and just all the things. There's so many things to just be so grateful for. And of course, my kids that, um, stayed up to watch me cross that finish line. And I think there's just so many things where you can kind of look back and be like, I did that. And that's all that matters. Um, so, all that to say, now that I've had a couple weeks to process kind of what happened and just the event as a whole, I'm excited. I don't have anything on the calendar as of yet for 2025, but I'm definitely toying with the idea of doing another full Ironman at some point next year. And I definitely have a couple of friends that are doing some 70.3s that might just pull my leg to do them with them. So we'll see. So stay tuned to the YouTube channel, or follow me on Instagram to find out what's next. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you later.